welcome back. Today I'm finally going to put the airbags, the front airbags, in the Bounder. And I'm going to do it the easy way. This job went a lot easier than I expected to, but I learned a trick, so we'll get to that. The first thing I want to show you here is I've already put this, the driver's side airbag in it. And remember what that coil spring looks like. There's the blue bag and the coil spring. Remember what that looks like, because we're going to go in and see just the few tools that are needed to do this. This is my first time doing this job, and like a lot of things, what did we do when we take it on a project is maybe look on YouTube for a video. You know, chances are somebody's done this job before and made a YouTube video about it. So I did look, and you know, the first video I come across, a guy just obviously, I mean, he really did it the hard way. Another video, the guy must have followed the directions that came with the airbags a little better, because his way was much easier. And I think I can up that a notch and do it just a little easier yet. So we'll go in the garage. I'll show you what came with the kit and the tools that I used. Not too many tools. Back to the first guy that did it the hard way. I mean, he separated a lot of this suspension work. He loosened up and separated this part of the suspension from the ball joint, loosened the tie rod end, and dropped this whole control arm down out of the way, which meant he also, you know, removed the front wheels and tires, and then dropped the suspension down to where he had access to the bottom of the spring. Well, that's not necessary to take all them suspension parts. That was a lot of unnecessary work to do it that way. So let's one more thing I want to show you before we go in is down below here. There's a hole in the bottom that you're supposed to stick the airbag up through. Well, there's a bit of a trick to that, and that's the part we're going to get to. That's the tricky part. Now, I've already lined up the parts here that came with it. Obviously, the second airbag's already in. I have not installed the air lines yet. The one option is you could just use that air valve on the bottom if you wanted to climb underneath of it to adjust the air in them all the time, or they do have the lines that extend up where it's more easily accessible. And that's the one thing I did not get out yet. So let's get those out here too. Now, this is the hardware for, once the bag is in, there's some mounting hardware, a couple of clamps you could run the airline through. They only supplied some 3/8 nuts. I don't know where the bolt is. Maybe there's existing bolt or stud that, if there is, you can use those. But other than that, zip ties and some tubing that kind of looks like heat shrink tubing. I guess if there was an area where the airlines might rub on something, you could use those, or cut that and use sections to help it protect it in those areas if that were to happen. But zip ties to mount it securely, and the other valves that go on the end of that line once you run it up into the chassis or up into the body somewhere where it's easier to get to. So, and the little caps. Now these caps have their little tool on the end of them actually. And here's one tool that I'm not going to use those. I have a tool for doing that. I'll show you what that's for here in just a second. And the rest of the tools. Now this kit says right there P30 front from 1963 to 1999. Okay, this fits a lot of Chevrolet P30 Chevrolet chassis. So the Bounder's in 1990. That's it. This is these are the Firestone coil right airbags. Part number, I guess it's W23-760-4100, or maybe just 4100. Oops, there's a couple more parts in here I missed. I did put them in the other side, but these. Those are important. And an empty bag that I already got parts on. Never mind this stuff back here, okay? That's for another project. That's a project I picked up. I know some of you are probably wondering, I mentioned in the last video about an upcoming project I might be getting. That's part of it. We'll get to that. Okay, I guess I'll quickly mention what that project is. Some of you already know. You found a post that I made. I picked up this old mini bike. I don't know. We'll get into we'll get into that later in the video. I'm going to share some things about that later, or on another forum, or on another channel. I'll get into that later. Let's get back to these airbags for now. Now, Firestone was a little vague about their instructions. For the most part, I mean, much of it's okay. You kind of get the idea of what's going on here. There's even a pressure chart. The Bounder is the P30, the 10,000 to 15,000 pound GVWR. So these bags will be aired up between 40 and 70 psi when we're all done. But the thing is, this picture of the airbag. Now, it just looks like they twisted it. Okay, yeah, the air helper spring looks like they just simply twisted it. Well, it's going to take more than that to get it in, believe me. Okay, so the airbag itself, this thing has to be collapsed. Remember that hole I showed you underneath that this thing has to go up through? Well, it measures. One of the tools we need is a little ruler. Okay, and the hole actually measures 2 1/8 inches. So I took a hose clamp and I adjusted it to that size, to 2 1/8 inches. Okay, so that's the size of the hole that this thing has to go up through. Okay, now, okay, that's how's that going to happen, right? Because this stuff, to collapse it, I mean, it's pretty tough stuff. It's believe me, it's tough stuff. Now, one thing to do here is, actually it's a little easier if you take the air valve out of it, okay? But believe me, it's still tough. But yes, the air valve has to come out of it. Yeah, this is that air valve tool. It reaches in that stem and pulls the valve out almost. And yeah, that does come on these caps. You know, when you're done, you can put the caps on it. But the other end of that tool, of that cap, is that same little tool. But it's kind of small. I have one of these 4-way tools for this sort of thing. It's just easier to use. So I'm going to take that valve out, and we're still left with really trying to collapse this thing down to from, let's see how big this is. This is about 3 1/4 inches down to 2 1/8. All right, hang on here. Okay, I'm back. I was distracted for just a moment. Okay, with this thing, with the valve out of it, okay, it's easier to collapse, but really to get that in that hole, this thing actually almost has to be collapsed in on itself like a, how am I gonna, like a, it ends up being like a C-shaped, because you got to fold one end in, almost in on itself to get the rest of it to collapse. It's pretty durable stuff. It can take it. How are we going to do this? I have, in the YouTube videos, I watched, you know, it's hard to do with just 2 hands, because it would take one person maybe to get it collapsed and wrap a zip tie around it to hold it. So the idea was to get this thing collapsed all the way from one end down to the other, with zip ties around it, and then insert it. But let me tell you what, that at first I tried that, and believe me, it was a struggle. It just was not happening easy. I was going to get a helper I needed a third hand if there was any chance of doing that. Okay, well, that's where these hose clamps, I come up with the idea of getting these hose clamps. Now, I got 3 different sizes, probably actually 2 would do, but maybe at least one big one to get it started, and then putting several down along the way. So, that's why I went ahead and did one side first to get these kinks worked out. This actually goes pretty easy. Okay, so the valve goes down. This is the end that's going to go up first. Now, oh, there's something else important here before I don't want to forget. Let's back up just a minute, because probably the hardest part of the job is actually getting the old airbags out, or what's left of them. And that's where this knife might come in handy. If you remember the coil springs, there's not a lot of gap or room in there to get in them to cut the old ones out, so it's a little hard to get a utility knife in there. So you might want to sacrifice, or actually you can do it without harming a kitchen knife. Something with a rigid blade that's pretty sharp. You know, you get in between the gaps and cut. And for safety's sake, always cut away from you. Don't be cutting towards you. Cut away, for safety's sake. Now, I'll show you what's left of these airbags that were in here. So mine were really easy. Okay, this is an old inner tube. I was going to use it to protect the airbag when I put the C-clamps on it. Then I found out it really didn't need it. Ideally, you know, there's that top piece and bottom piece. No, actually, these were those. What's left of them. They're all cracked and they're brittle from age and exposed to the elements. But ideally what you can do is go in between each spring. Let me get this out here a little bit better. Go in between each spring with a knife and you know, make cuts. And you can reach in there with a screwdriver maybe and work one end out between the gap of the spring, grab it with pliers, and then maybe just pull the whole thing out, or most of it, or get the thing out in chunks. So that's probably going to be the most difficult part of the whole job, is just to make the cuts. Cut the old one out, yank it out. The other thing to keep in mind here is this end goes in first. This end is at the bottom. These discs are to protect the ends of it when they're in there. It's important to know that there's like a bump in the center of it, and it's a little tricky once it's all collapsing up in there, but this has to be slid in like at the last minute, and there's a little action that happens here. You'll know it's on when it kind of drops down. You're going to want to remember that action later on, that it actually is centered on there on that bump. Okay. The second part of that is, once the spring's in, another tool I have here is I have an extension in a socket that once it's in the whole way, I put this over the valve and I push up on the bag, and then I put a screwdriver, I need 3 hands again, and I slide a screwdriver in across to hold it up. And then I remove the socket, and you'll see how this all goes. It might seem a little complicated. And I get the socket out of the way, and that allows me enough room to get this started. And then all kind of one motion, I pull the screwdriver out and let that come on, and then I let that back down. You'll see how it goes. It's probably a little easier than what I'm describing it. I'm going to put this bigger clamp, you know, a little bit, 1.5 inches or so down, 2 inches. I'm going to tighten this up on here. Okay, that's got a little bit of a squeeze on it, and then push in on one side. That's not quite enough. Let's go a little bit more. Yep. Oh, that's a little bit tighter. And you'll see, okay, well, now we'll push it in, and it'll begin to kind of collapse on itself. Okay, once it does that, we can tighten it up a little bit more. Okay, we're going to work this in a little bit more. Okay. And I think we can run it in just a little more yet. And we'll probably stop there for now. Okay, now where's that one You'll see this is still a long ways from being able to go through, okay? So let me see. Here's our next smaller clamp. And, oops, was that the one? No, I think it's this one. But we're going to open that up a little bit, okay? And put this up here. Okay, that would have been easier if I would have left this up a little bit further, but that's okay. That wasn't too bad. And we have to leave this one down. We have to leave a little bit of this, the bag sticking out, so that we can get it started in the hole. Once we get that started in the hole, in that lower control arm of the bounder, then we can release that first clamp. But let me work these a little bit. Let me squeeze this one a little bit more. Okay. This is the size we need to be able to get it into. We're still not there yet. Look at that. So we're going to run this smaller one in some more. We're getting there now. Okay, we're almost there. Now, keep in mind every time you tighten it, you can work this a little bit around with your thumbs. And so what I'm going to do is move this bigger one down now. See how much easier that is? I can work that with one hand now. Okay, so it does get much easier. There's a little bit of jostling around there at the beginning, but it does get easier. Run this down in the middle a little bit. Oops, a little bit of bump in the camera. Oops, I have to open these the whole way up now because I actually have to wrap it around. I have to go over that first one and come down here. You'll see how easy this will go up into the bounder. Yeah, I was afraid that these were going to cut into the airbag, but really they don't. Squeeze that one down good. And we'll just squeeze it around a little bit. That's pretty good. We'll move our big clamp down some more. Let's go a little bit more. Okay, we'll move it down here. Now this middle part, now this is a tricky part where this rib is in the middle. If it's just the right side, I found out doing the first side, it actually will catch on that. So, we're gonna try to squeeze it a little extra in the middle. All right, let's get another one out here. How about this one? I don't think that's big enough to go over. Oh yeah. Probably wondering what's going to happen when we get to the bottom, right? That's just going to fold out like that. I'm going to move this one way up here. Oops, a little more camera bump. Now you'd think that would rip and tear and damage that plastic, but I don't know. Firestone says to cram them up through there by just twisting it according to them directions. I mean, you really think that's good? It's just that easy. No. All right, just to kind of double check this, I have these dial calipers, or a little more precision measuring instrument. I'm gonna set that to 2 1/8. Okay, that's right about, okay. And it just kind of tells me that, yeah, it's a little egg-shaped. It's smaller there, but on average, I think it's gonna let me get that up in there. It'll, you know, it does have some give to it. I think that's gonna be enough that I can get that up in there. Ooh. Okay, I think I got my handful of tools in the airbag. Hopefully here in about 5 minutes we'll be done. Okay, here's an important part I should have mentioned was that, you know, I have the bounder jacked up. I have the, I just used the leveling jacks in my remote control. I raised the bounder up. The suspension is supposed to be hanging now, and I double checked this on the, actually I have the service manual for the Chevrolet P30 chassis, and it says to jack it up by this center cross member up in here. But, you know, I kind of cheated and used the leveling jacks, and I'm just going to support it here in the center. And this is how I had it. I just did the brakes on it. I went ahead and did that. I didn't make a video, but you know, I had to have the wheels and tires off, and by all means you don't want to trust those leveling jacks just on themselves. So I built this here. I have, these are 6x8, you know, oak I don't know, big oak board that was 8 feet long. I had it cut into 4 2-foot long sections. I staggered them, you know, 2 that way, kind of built a crib here, and 2 that way, and then you know, a couple 2x6s under the frame. But, you know, I let the weight of the vehicle down onto this, and it was just good, as solid as can be. And then I actually run the jacks back down a little bit to kind of share some of the weight. So this was really stable, and certainly I do that every time if I'm going to take the wheels off. But that job's all done. The brakes are done, and we did put I did put new shocks on it. You'll probably see those white things back there at some point during all this. And also up above here, got the new Monroe stabilizer, which in itself is just a shock absorber. But this is all real basic stuff, you know, nut and bolt on the end, and, you know, a couple of nuts on this end. It's easy stuff. The vehicle doesn't need jacked up to replace this. There's enough clearance to easily climb underneath here and do this kind of work, and the shocks as well. But the brakes, of course, the wheels have to come off. And anyway, let's move on to this airbag thing. Alright, so let's see how this is going to go. Okay, bang, right up to the first clamp. Nice. I made it plenty small. So what I'm going to do is, as we go, I'll release these clamps. Okay, now, they did say, I mean, the Firestone directions did say to use some soap or something to lubricate that hole prior to inserting these in. But I think with my method, we don't need it. Let me take that clamp the whole way off. Okay. And we're going to push it up to the next one. Not too much trouble there. And we're going to take it off. Oops, that one went flying. And work that up here. Not too much trouble. Wiggles on up. Okay, now whether it's going to get caught on that rib or not. Oh, right past it. Nice. See? And then we'll take this one off. Now we got to watch. There's something we can't forget to do here. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves and put the whole way up in there yet. Let's get it up a little further. It's a little tougher. I could throw one of them clamps back on her, but and I might. Where are we at? See, I have to watch what's going on up top, because At some point I have to put that blue disc on the end of it, and we're right about there. It's about that time. I need that to actually start expanding a little bit in there. Now, I could get the air gun and blow a little bit of air into there, kind of to let that pop back out, and that would do it. I might do that. This is the air line off the old airbag. We're going to get that out of the way. Those are going to be replaced with the new lines. Okay, that did partially expand up there. And I can actually see that little nub that's on top. Where's one of my blue discs? So we're just going to slide that in on top. Oops, and hopefully you can see that fall onto that disc. I might have to, oh, there it went. Oh, perfect. Okay, remember that action I showed you, how it drops, you know, when it's on there, right? It drops. Well, there it is. So now I can push the airbag the rest of the way up in. The audio portion of this part of the video is damaged, so I'm just going to voice over what's going on here. I'm using a socket, this deep well socket, to go over top of the valve stem so as not to damage it, so I can push the airbag up. Then I'm going to try to trap it with a screwdriver to hold it up in place. But I need to get it up a little better than that. And yeah, so I can get it up out of the way and get the blue disc on the bottom in. For whatever reason, I don't seem to have the same access to slide this blue disc in on this side. I'm not sure why. From the far side, maybe. I don't know. Maybe this one might be easier. I might just put this one in from the bottom. Give that a try, maybe. I'm going to try to reposition that screwdriver a little bit better and get that valve stem up out of the way just a little bit better. These blue discs are pretty stiff, but they will bend. I think I can get it up through this hole. Might be just easier to do it this way. So with a little bit of struggling and forcing and messing around, I'll get it up in there. I'll try a little pushing it this way and pushing it that way, and it'll go. Then I'll just reach up in there a little bit with a socket extension and just move the bottom of the airbag around a little bit and get that valve to come down through the hole. And this side's about in. Bella, you weren't very much help, girl. I thought you was gonna come help me. What are you doing? You just want to go back inside and what? You just want to go and take a nap or something? Come here. No, come here. Come here. What are you doing? You're not much help today. Huh? You're just not much help today. Yeah, now go under the bounder. No, hang on. All right, I'll let you in a minute. I gotta lay some tools down. We're done with that. We'll sort that mess out in a bit. Belle says I'm gonna go in and either get a drink or take a nap. She says, you're trying to put me to work, and I'm not having it. I've since moved the bounder, and the rest of this is really easy and straightforward. Part of the instructions. I have the airlines on. Turning you around here. Okay, there's a little elbow fitting on the end of the airline kit. Just screw that on. Just bring it up here and zip tie it along where it's convenient. And I gotta get those zip ties off yet. And here's where it's mounted on the bounder. It just comes, the airline comes down through a hole there, and put the nut on it, put air in it, put a cap on it, and it's done. Okay, one last thing here about the mini bike project. There's reasons why I don't want to put too much about this on this channel. this is a project that's I'm going to go into a lot of detail about, detailed repairs on it, and I don't want to bore everybody to death on this channel. And this is an RVing channel. It only pertains to RVing in such that, okay, maybe it'll make a good camp bike, and so maybe at different stages of progress I might give a quick update about it. But as far as making a video in a lot of detail about it, that's a whole other genre, okay? And it's a popular genre at that. Barn finds, getting old things running, restorations. So it's another category. And I do have another channel that I had started years ago when I was doing little tractors and stuff. And there were just a lot of some little quick uploads where I would just share, maybe a project I got, or I got something running. I just post something to a group of other enthusiasts, and then more discussion would happen over that project there. I didn't make a production out of it, so to speak. So I have posted a recent video on my other channel to it's kind of a rebirth of the channel. It's I haven't uploaded there in a long time, but I have recently posted a video there. It shows more about the bike and what my intentions there on that channel are. Things are still going to stay the same on this channel, but along the way, when I come across this sort of thing, I'm going to put them over there. If you're interested, find this sort of thing interesting, then on YouTube, search for Dave's Other Stuff. And along with all the older videos, which aren't too much to brag about, there is the recent video I posted, and you'll see more about this. That's that. Okay, the Bounder's really about wrapped up. I think I've pretty much done about everything I wanted to do to it this season here at the garage. It's about ready for the road again, the big roads. So anyway, that's all I have today. As always, like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.